the best part of an RPG for me is not that sort of minutia. It is the medium itself. It is the sitting around a table, telling a story, and there has to be rules that govern it, because otherwise you are just telling campfire stories.
Yep.
But where do we find the balance between being able to play a game, having a game, and the game getting the hell out of the way at a certain point so we can experience this thing?
Welcome to Tabletop Talk, a unique podcast where I delve into the minds of creatives in the tabletop gaming space. I'm here to uncover their creative process and inspirations, driven by my passion for understanding who they are and why they create. Enjoy this talk with Matthew John, a designer of the new Conan RPG, Conan, the Hyborian Age from Monolith. We talk about how the Conan comics from Marvel was instrumental to both of our nerd journeys, how being a teacher of kids impacted his design approach, and how the success of Monolith's Conan board game influenced the design of this new RPG. Okay, sit back, relax, curse, crom, and enjoy my time with Matt.
My name is Anthony Boyd, but you might know me better as Runeslinger. When I'm not working on my own sporadic RPG, podcasting, and video projects, I listen to Tabletop Talk for its far more regular deep dives into the brains of top designers in the role-playing game and wargaming spaces. I enjoy it a lot, and I think you will too.
Howdy friends, Craig here. My guest today is Matthew John. For over a decade, Matthew has earned his coin in the classroom by encouraging teenagers to read. Remarkably, he's retained enough mental fortitude to play tabletop games and write in his spare time. To his surprise, Monolith and Modiphius hired him to contribute to their Conan games, and Nightfall Games invited him to write missions for their Terminator RPG. Though his Constitution score ranks slightly below average, he thrives in the harsh Canadian climates of Nova Scotia with his lovely wife, children, and a menagerie of cats and dogs. You can hear him ramble about swords and sorcery on the Rogues in the House podcast. Check out his fiction and nonfiction contributions to Weird Book, Tales from the Magician's Skull, and Grimdark Magazine. Sadly, despite contributing to 3 different Conan tabletop games, Crom continues to ignore him. Matthew, welcome to the third floor.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me.
All right, my friend. So, as we talked before we went on mic officially, podcasting is nothing new to you. Both creating a podcast and being on a podcast. So I'm about to ask the freaking question you get asked every single time you come on a podcast. But we're going to try to do it a little bit differently. So okay. At one point, Matt, you knew nothing about this hobby. You didn't know about grabbing sheets of paper, funky dice, and writing stuff on a sheet of paper, and then, pretending to be somebody else. And it was put in front of you for the very first time. Can we go back there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we can. And it's a story I've talked about on a few other occasions, but I mean, your listeners have probably not heard that. And frankly, getting locked into nostalgia is nice for nerds like us, man. It's what
it is.
It's the power that fuels us, right? So, I started out with tabletop games mainly. There's really 2 things that jump out at me, and it was Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, where my older brother and my uncle and my older brother's friends, they got together. They were in probably high school at the time, and I was just young. And of course, I feel like they were kind of into it, because it was early 90s or late 80s or whatever it was. And so for them, it was just like a thing that you did. But for me, at an early age, I was like, oh, my God, I somehow knew I was going to be a huge nerd. Like watching He-Man and cartoons like that and seeing, brilliant comic illustrations. That was no goddamn joke for me. For me, that was like my mind was blown. And I feel like I was born in the era where that stuff was the best it has ever been, or at least it kind of came into its own during that time. And so, I'm seeing these guys play this, and I'm just sitting there. I was invited to play, and they're like, "Wow, you're going to play the cleric because we need an ambulance for this mission." And I'm like, "I don't care. It's fine. It's fine. I will do that, and I will do whatever you want. Just let me stay here and like gaze over at those books and tell me when to roll dice. It's awesome." So that was like my first foray into that. And then as my friends and I got a little older and we could kind of do it on our own, then it was, there was no stopping us. The other thing I distinctly remember from tabletop games, and this predates even HeroQuest, which is often a stepping stone game, which miraculously they relaunched and didn't update it at all, and it's still wildly successful, which blows my goddamn mind.
It does, because it's not a very good
frankly game. I was like, hold on. I remember that Kickstarter came around, or it was like Hasbro Pulse or whatever they were doing. I was like, hold on, you're not updating it at all?
Right. The technology has advanced, Hasbro.
Yeah. It's like, I was just playing. I know I'm getting off topic slightly, but it's like I was just playing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the Cowabunga collection, and it's all the old games re-released. And I was like, yeah, sweet. I used to love those. I started playing them, and I was like, they're not as good as Shredder's Revenge, which is like an updated version of the same style game. I was like, HeroQuest could have done that, maybe. Anyways, not to bag on it because it's clearly doing very well and folks love it. But prior to HeroQuest was Dungeon. And Dungeon, the old TSR game.
Yep.
This would have been the version before. I mean, they did so many versions of that game, but this was like your meeple was the same thing as from Sorry, that little
right?
elongated, not unphallic looking game piece. And I just, I remember just looking at those cards and being like, oh my God, green slime is the most difficult enemy. What is a green slime?
Yeah.
This is crazy. And so, I don't know, man, those simple games just really cracked my imagination open wide, and, stacks of Conan comics and that sort of thing. I was like, well, this is what I'm into.
What's so funny about that, Matt, listening to you is several things, and I got a ton of questions. But first off, Conan, what's the name of the artist? Begins with a B.
Buscema.
Buscema, thank you. Buscema
was or Buscema. I don't know how you pronounce it.
I can't remember. I can see it, and I do it. And his Conan was my introduction to fantasy. It was my introduction to comic books. Yep. Like that comic from Marvel was a gateway to so many of the things that I just fell in love with. And it, it led me to then go on and read the Conan stories. But then I bought Fantastic Four. Like it was a gateway for me.
Yeah. And I think like in Buscema, John Buscema, Big John. Let's
go Big John.
He, I mean, his pencil work was so clean and just strong. And Conan looked like he was half angry all the time.
Yep.
Which puts a different spin on fantasy. And that's always really stuck with me, is that I don't like a lot of whimsy in my fantasy. And I've said this countless times. It's like fantasy is my favorite genre, but I hate most of it. It's often in the opposite direction I want it to be, but that sort of thing help me see that, you can take the whimsy out of He-Man and still have this badass. And I don't mean it needs to be all edgy all the time. It's just, there's a grit to it that, jumps off the page, and you don't have to be like embarrassed of it. You don't have to be like, hey, lightning bolt.
Right. I agree. Yeah. I agree. And it was, because Conan was my introduction to fantasy, it tainted the rest of fantasy for me. And I found myself being very discerning about that genre, much like you. But I want to go back to you being a cleric. So you're a kid and you're getting a chance to play with the big kids and the adults, right? And it's tapping into something that we would realize was an origin primal love that you had. But then you mentioned, as you got older, you ended up playing with your friends, right? So you transition out of that group into more of a peer group. What changed in the way that you played the game from your first early sessions as just a Padawan into, being more agency and more control of the game? Do you remember what shifted?
Yeah, well, I think a major thing was there was growing pains, right? Like,
right.
Because you had to, a GM has to be kind of the mature person at the table. And I'm sure anyone can argue that, but it's that you had to have somebody who was a storyteller to be good, right? And anyone can you can phone it in and make it work, but
yep,
you had to kind of be a storyteller, be able to navigate rules, and be social. And that's a cocktail that not a lot of people have, right? It's kind of rare. And so there was some growing pains in that we were trying to get a Goldilocks situation where we had the just right person to do it. And I tended to be the person who was just right in terms of the storytelling and the storyteller and who facilitated these things and set a scene or would draw intricate pictures and stuff. But then navigating the rules when I was younger or navigating the friends in terms of min-maxers before we even knew that was a thing, that's a whole other element. And so going from playing with my uncle, who was relatively older, my older brothers, there was more of a leadership bit or a master pupil situation where so it's tougher when you're all peers and you're doing it, because who wants to respect the GM when it's just your buddy?
Right. That's right. Yep.
So, I mean, that's really what sticks out to me. And of course, over time, we learned to navigate that, and we traded roles and game groups switched a bit. But it's crazy that the group I still do RPGs and board games with is the same kids.
That's crazy.
The same people I did when I was, in literally grade 7.
Wow.
Yeah.
So AD&D, kind of the first game. What are some other significant landmark games for you? So as you continue to play and explore the hobby, I assumed you played games other than D&D. Looking back on it now, what were some of the big, the major games for you?
So it's funny because there's the pre-internet days and then there's the internet days, and so I was born in 82, so I'm a pre-internet person. So after D&D, I think, we definitely played like I say, Dungeon and Hero Quest for tabletops. We definitely played the D6 Star Wars, which I remember even being at the time, we thought that was a solid game, and I've never played it since then. I just have very vague memories rattling around.
Surprisingly, it's still pretty damn good.
And they re-released it, I think, recently too.
Yeah, West End has been messing around with it. It changed a lot. It was way ahead of its time, right? So looking back on it, it's a little rusty. But man, when that game came out, there was nothing close to it whatsoever. My biggest thing with because I went back and looked at it recently, the scenario modules for it are just so railroady, old school, so that's really where it shows its age. But at the core mechanics, it's pretty damn good. That was a big game.
Yeah. And we played that a fair amount, and I'm trying to think of what, I even used to make games, man. I made a Mortal Kombat fighting game that was part RPG, part just a weird system where you could build dudes and they could fight each other. Okay. I wish to God I still had it, because all of my friends, all of us were like, man, this works incredible. I know it was a D10 based thing. I tried to spin it into a board game. I tried to do the same thing with Doom at a point, because I was just really into, those properties, and I wanted to, video games weren't, they were mind blowing back then, but they were not what they are today. Yeah. And so you wanted to expand them. So yeah, I did a lot of, I made my own, but I'm trying to think. We definitely did Warhammer. This would have been Warhammer 40K, 2nd or 3rd edition is probably when I jumped in on that. So we played some of that. Savage Worlds eventually. And we were kind of a group that hung on to stuff for a while. We really, once you learn a system, we were like, that's cool, we'll keep doing that. God, I did some Mech Warrior at a point. It's a lot. And then, of course, with the board game renaissance later, mid-20s and onward, I just played tons of different tabletop games like that. We broke into, I played the Modifius Conan recently I've been doing did some Alien RPG, and honestly, my favorite thing to play now for a role-playing game, I really want theme, and I want the system to get out of the way, and I want to just have fun and do shared storytelling. And so Morkborg is it's been my jam. I play it with some other sword and sorcery nerds online, and like it's just hop in, play the thing, role play your ass off, and don't worry about if your character dies, because
you're really making us question the not because I like it edgy comment from earlier.
But that's the thing is that I mean, Morkborg is definitely edgy, but it's also like, here's a poop coated sword to kill your enemy with. So there's just like this crazy humor about it too. So
I agree. So Matt, we kind of glossed over, I think, something that's I want to go back to, which is you said at one point I made a game, and what I find interesting is trying to understand where that comes from, because you and I have a very similar origin story, right? We played games, got like, holy shit, I love this stuff, and just buried it. Like I watched every He-Man, the whole thing. But I have a podcast about it, the whole thing. I have never had a desire to design a game. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to know what's the difference, right? So what was it in you that said, I want to make a fighting game?
I've been thinking about this recently, and So I think for me, it's that when I was doing that back in the day was because those things didn't exist, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, of course, games existed, but I don't know. I think there's some of it is a bit innate. But the thing I've been thinking about recently is that I think there's somewhat of a neurodivergent angle, potentially. Now, I guess what I mean is I grew up and like I definitely had ADHD growing up. I mean, it's not a thing it disappears, but I didn't know it, right? And so there's aspects of gaming that work really well for me, and others that are a challenge that I didn't really necessarily have pinned down. And so as I got into my adult age, I was like, shit, something about this is broken, and I cannot focus on just regular stuff. Maybe it's the world, maybe it's past things that have occurred. I don't know. And I'm also a teacher by trade. So I think what it is that if you're somebody who might struggle to learn a game, or you struggle to focus on a thing, or there are aspects of this game or this system that don't really jive with you, you're able to kind of diagnose why that is, and you are able to trim away the things that don't work. So as an instructor, it's weird. Like I struggled in math growing up, but I think it was that mainly I couldn't necessarily focus on the bit, and I couldn't take the direction as well. Right. But once I learned a concept, I can teach it rather well, because there's certain fog that clears. Yeah. And so now I don't know really if I'm onto something here or not, but I think it's that I can diagnose the things that don't work for me and why, and I can spin them into a way that I like. So I grew up on some of these crunchy games. You learn them, you go through the crucible of like THAC0 or whatever it is, even if we agree that that's crunchy or not. But older school games have more subsystems and things happening. And so at a certain point, I learned to navigate that. I suffered that. Mm-hmm. And now in my older age, the fashion is more so to trim that stuff away, generally speaking. And I'm realizing that, oh, wow, that's okay to do. And not only that, but it's actually there's a whole audience for people who want something a little more trimmed. And so I think it's that I have been able to boil things down to what I need them to be, and not have to try to go for a simulator or try to do a thing that is expected, because I need to do what's going to work for me. I know I want to prioritize the storytelling, not just for the GM, but for the players as well. And I don't want something that's going to constantly get your nose back in the rule book. Right. That's a viable form of gaming. Okay. Yep. You can have the crunchy like just crazy stats and swings and
you can play Lancer. Yep.
Exactly. Or GURPS or whatever it is. You can do all that. And that's fine. It's just that's not what I want to do. And I don't think it is what I want out of an RPG as a player or even philosophically, if that makes sense.
So you mentioned teaching is your profession now. And something I find interesting is the back and forth between our hobbies and our profession. So let's talk about one direction first, which is hobby to profession. Where have you found your background in this hobby and in tabletop gaming? How did it inform you as a teacher?
Yeah, I mean, definitely did. I think it's even just a rule book or learning a system and then having to teach friends or having to learn from friends or having to work as a group and just learn that basically we can't all talk at the same time. Right. So that's a piece of it. The social element, being an interesting speaker, because in some cases what happens in teaching, they do that old adage of they don't have to like you, they just have to respect you, which is 100% stinky, steaming horse shit. It is such garbage. It's funny. Like if you're in the military, that might work, right? That's fine. But public school is not the military, right?
And it's something that people that are unlikable say, right?
Exactly. And that's kind of what I'm getting at. Is it like you have to be socially interesting. Right. And even though I'm teaching kids that these are not my peers and the jokes I tell have to be clean, but like you have to be able to captivate an audience. Like there's an element to this job that is stand up and entertainment. And, most people would blanch at that in education circles, be like, oh, my God, it's not about that. It's about the pedagogy. And it's like, yeah, sure. You go ahead and hook these kids who are highly distracted, have a million things going on in their own lives. And you're not going for their hearts before their minds? Give me a break. So I think that angle was helpful. And I don't know if you've ever gamed somewhere that isn't with your own gaming group, but there are some personalities out there that you need to navigate in this sphere.
Very much so.
And I think that's a neurodivergent thing as well, right? There's people from all walks of life who are attracted to these kinds of games. And we meet them all in this, and the same as you would in public school. And so, and I mean, it has prepared me in many ways to almost be attuned to that, right? Like, even if I'm talking to someone on social media and I can tell by the way that they're approaching certain questions or asking things, they're not actually being an asshole in many cases. It's just, that's how they are communicating.
That's how they're wired. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And
that's how they interact with the world.
That's right. So, I mean, there's a lot of overlap with that. And I mean, of course, I've designed mini games and stuff that I've played with kids. And this will be a segue when we start talking about Conan the Hyborian Age. But one thing that came up last year or a year ago, a teacher came in and they wanted to do a D&D club. And I'm like, cool. Yeah. That's great. And especially it's super hot right now and everyone knows what it is because Big Bang Theory or something. Yeah. Or Stranger Things or whatever it is. And so I was like, yeah, how could I not? How could I not be someone who helps out with that? So I decided to do that. And there we were on day one or whatever. And we're trying to teach these kids the game. And, even 5th ed is accessible for sure. But I don't know. There's still a lot of, I'm not going to call it junk, but junk to the layperson. Stuff that just like gets in the way of.
It's a big jump.
It's a lot. And so I was thinking I would rather. The best part of an RPG for me is not that sort of minutia. It is the medium itself. It is the sitting around a table, telling a story, and there has to be rules that govern it, because otherwise you are just telling campfire stories.
Yep.
But where do we find the balance between being able to play a game, having a game, and the game getting the hell out of the way at a certain point so we can experience this thing? So with what I was designing next, I was like, I want this to be able to be picked up by middle schoolers, layperson, just whoever.
Yep.
Without having to have background knowledge in RPGs. If you ever played a board game, you should be able to follow along and learn this thing. And then we can get deep with it after that.
Right. Yep. Yep. And when you think about it too, or what I've experienced, I should say, is that because that cliff to get to the top of D&D 5th ed is so steep, very often people are introduced to the game by not learning the game. A lot of times they're shoved a character sheet and they're saying you need to roll a D20 and what is this? You're going to add 2 to it. And over time, they slowly start taking in new rules. But a lot of time they're not engaging with the rules. They're just, they're doing what they're told, but still enjoying the role playing aspect of it, right? The rest of it's kind of being hidden away. And to your point, I agree. I mean, I think it's a terrible first game, but I get it. I get why it's so big. I get why, people do that. I want to talk about going back now. So now you're a hobby person. You've been teaching for a while. How has teaching changed how you hobby?
Exhaustion. That's a big part of it.
Adulting sucks.
Adulting is tough.
Has it changed how you run games or how you look at games after teaching a bunch of kids?
Yeah, I mean, it really does allow me to navigate personalities better.
Yeah.
Right. Even, like I say, I've been gaming with the same guys for decades, literally. And usually that's totally fine. But, you always have the quirks, the social quirks with people. And this buddy, my buddy here, he's this kind of gamer. This guy over here, he's this kind. And then that guy over there is that kind. And that's very much like a classroom too.
Right.
I would say it can go 2 ways. If everyone at the table is reasonable and chill, it increases my patience. Okay. If people are being unreasonable and not chill at the table, or someone's had a bad day, then my patience drops because I'm like, look, dude, I deal with this crap with teenagers. Yeah. You're an adult and you've not figured this out yet. So I don't have the patience for it. So I would say that's a part of it, but also the big skill I tell people when they're new teachers, I tell them all the time, do not continue to teach if the kids are talking over you at all. You can't do it. And if you do it, it won't work. So this is what I was saying earlier with GMs. They have to be social creatures in a sense and leaders in a sense, because people have to want to listen to you or be scared into it. I don't know.
Well, there's a level of engagement you have to have, right? And I think you have to have it as a GM and you have to have it as a teacher, I would imagine.
That's exactly it. You've got to be, the people that you're serving they have to be engaged with what you're throwing down.
Yep.
So that's a big piece of it. And just, just overall being receptive to needs too, because as a GM, you got to think like you have to try and set your game up so that if you're writing a pre-gen adventure, you want to write things so that your thief-like character has things to do, and your charisma-driven character has things to do, and your warrior has things to do, and your spellcaster, you have to give them those things to do. And then as a teacher, you got to do that same thing, right? Putting a movie on is not just putting a movie on. It's not like I need a break, so I'm putting a movie on. It's that you've got your visual kids who are into that visual storytelling more than they are with words on the page. And so we cover all of it so that everyone gets their moment, right?
So there's an easy version of this question and the real question. I'm going to give you the easier version, but I don't want you to answer it because I don't want you to answer the second one. The easy answer to this first question is, when did you become a professional game designer? And the answer to that is the first time somebody paid you. And I don't care about that. I want to know, when did you first feel like a professional game designer? Or recognize yourself as such?
It's a good question. I think that I've had low expectations for success.
Good to have in this industry.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I've always been glued to this kind of thing, storytelling, creating games, whatever, aesthetics of fantasy or sci-fi art. Like, I'm deeply into that stuff. And so professionally, I would say for me, it kind of hit me when I received a book in the mail that has a beautiful cover by a top of their game artist who created that cover, and other professionals did things that I called for. Like, what? So I stumbled into this gig. I had a group on Facebook called Conan Gaming Group. And then when Monolith first did their Conan role-playing game, board game.
Oh, yeah. Board game.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Monolith did that first, and then that was huge. It was like the first 3 million plus Kickstarter board game.
It was a big deal.
Like, what?
And a good game.
It's a great game.
And I love the same core mechanic led to the Batman game, which I thought was fantastic as well.
I agree. Poor rule book first way through. Which,
that's a totally different thing.
But we have rectified that, and I didn't write it for the record. I had nothing to do with that. Just putting that out there. But when that was going around, it was a big thing. Kickstarter was like, oh my God, what's happening here? And so I'm in this Conan gaming group that I run on Facebook, and so all the creators are in there.
Nice.
And so they knew who I was because I ran the group, because of course they want to hawk their wares in there. And then Modiphius shortly after, like, I don't know, I think it was the same year or 6 months later.
Feels like it was very close. Yeah.
Very close. They launched their game, and then they wanted to do a crossover book with the board game because the board game was hugely successful. Of course they did. And essentially I was like, man, if you guys need, I got a prototype from Monolith, because they were doing a thing where they wanted to give out prototypes of the game so that fans could create scenarios for that engine, which I did. But I was like, I've already got some of these tools. So if you want me to do some stuff for this book you're proposing, I'll do it. Next thing is Chris Birch at Modiphius is like, well, yeah, you want to write the book? Pitch me the book. And I was like, shit, what? Are you serious? And so I did not feel like a professional game designer at that point at all. I was just like, holy shit. I'm the dog who has chased this car, caught it, and now I'm like, uh-oh, what do I do with this?
Mm-hmm.
That said, I really did bust my ass on that book. It is all I thought of for months. I planned things. I even last minute in development came up with a crazy idea that ended up being the best part of the book. And
that's cool.
Which was essentially the solo co-op engine for the Monolith board game. I was like, I can sneak this in there. I think I know how I can make this work. Jesus, I wrote like 19 or 20 scenarios for Conan for that book, which is absolute madness.
That's bonkers.
Well, they're a lot goes into those. And I wouldn't do that now, right? But that's a testament to like, it's, someone's like, hey man, here's your opportunity. Like, I wanted to really do it. And so I did. I put a lot into there, and I think that book was fairly well loved. So I think that I would say I probably felt more professional when I had people speak to other publishers and say, you should get this guy to do this thing. So
that's cool.
Yeah. When I don't know who, I think it was Gary Harper maybe mentioned too. He was working on some stuff for Nightfall with the Terminator game. And I think he put my name forward because he's like, yeah, Matt's a great writer. He did the stuff on Conan for Modiphius and all that. And then when people were like, yeah, you should do this, I was like, that's awesome. I think like maybe I'm worthy, like a little bit.
Maybe I don't suck.
Maybe I don't suck. And again, with, I get my hands on one of these beloved properties from my childhood. I was like, I am going to treat this like it's the last chance I ever get. And I'm going to write the shit out of it. I'm going to write the Terminator movie that I would do if I could.
Right.
In a short mission for these guys. So yeah, I guess that's when it was, is when when you see that stuff in print and when people are asking you to do more things, it's like, oh man, wow. Okay.
That's the type of validation somebody with imposter syndrome needs, right? Is it's not when I'm asking, can I do it? It's when people are coming going, will you do it for me? And that's a big transition. That's a huge transition. So I totally get that.
It is powerful, and people mention it a lot for a reason. And I would say it is really only now I have shed most of it in terms of my fiction writing and my board game writing. I've done enough that not only people outside of myself have said that they enjoyed, but I'm looking at it now with just a different confidence of knowing how to navigate the thing, and I can speed it up. I'm not right. I don't have analysis paralysis with everything that I'm doing. So it's actually a really great feeling at the moment.
I bet it is. And it I would imagine, like the first time you wrote the Conan supplement there, you'd never effing done it before. You'd only ever read them and consumed them. And now and so you tried things, threw it away. Like, I'm sure there's a ton of trial and error. And now, after doing it a few more times, I would imagine, I kind of get my voice now, right? I have my voice in the classroom. I have my voice as a GM, and now I might have my voice as a creator. Does that sound right?
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. And it's actually madness how many things, even from like my old, like when I used to play games, I would play a system, and I'm actually fairly adverse to doing house rules. I don't mean never do them. I just find them slightly insulting to the creator of the game. I don't mean that no one should do them. I don't mean that creators create perfect things. It's just that I'm very hesitant to switch what they're doing, because usually there's a motivation behind every little bit. And I want to play the game as I think the creator wants it to be played. That said, there have been things in the past where I'm like, ooh, I could streamline this thing. Again, I think this is part of the ADHD bit where I'm like, right. I don't want extra heft on my brain. I don't want extra mental load when I'm trying to do a very simple thing, right? So there are adaptations I put in place on certain games that I then really liked, and I have used them years, even maybe a decade later.
That's something
where I was like, I can use this for my own thing. Same with the fiction I write. I'm like, ooh, there's that really cool one tiny concept that I came up with when I was like 15. And let me tell you, 15-year-olds don't have good ideas for stories, except they kind of do sometimes. Right. There's kernels in there, right? And it's amazing the sort of things that will stick with you and you can use later.
Well, and there's a reason they stuck with you, right? There's the stuff that stuck with you is a fraction of your shitty ideas when you were 15, but those crap ones, those fell off. But for some reason, some stayed there and said, I'm not done with you yet, and stuck with you. The Insider Insight series allows me to sit down with designers, developers, artists, writers, and creators and learn how they approach their work. I try to understand their process, inspiration, and the methods for crafting their creations. We've got a lot to talk to Matt about. The first thing I want to talk to Matt about is, do we really need another Conan game? We'll be right back.
Hello, my name is Sam Dunewald, and I'm here to tell you about Dice Exploder, my tabletop RPG design podcast where each week I take a single game mechanic and break it down with a friend. Come listen to me talk to Alex Roberts about love and pity, John Harper about elegance and layout, and Mikey Ham about, what else? Exploding dice! It's Dice Exploder, breaking down RPG design one mechanic at a time. Find it wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, so not gonna lie to you, I own many Conan RPGs, including Modiphius's, the last one from Modiphius, which I liked but didn't love. And my love for it was built on the passion of the people. I could smell the passion of the people that made that game.
Yes.
And the reason I don't love it is because it was a very early version of the 2D20 system. And I have many other 2D20 systems, and I've seen how it's matured and it's really done well. And I think, I wonder if Chris had the license longer, whether we would have seen a second edition of Conan. But the one thing I will say is that, I read, especially, God, what was the one in the supplement campaign with the serpent in the name? One of the last things that they put out.
Oh, I think it was when Jason Durrell wrote.
It was, and it was Jason is the one that I talked to Jason about this.
Yeah, what was it?
And it, like, you want to talk about just a love letter to Conan? That whole book is just a beautiful love letter to Conan.
Well, that's why I made sure to get Jason back. For our game.
I heard that Jason was coming back, which is because that man loves him some Conan.
He does.
So that makes me super happy. And find out that Monolith's got it. And my first instinct is, are we going to be putting some wrapping paper around the board game and make it an RPG? Then I started talking to people in the industry about who was getting involved and what the approach was going to be. And now I am excited. Now I'm looking forward to it. Even though I don't know the details yet, but that's why you're here. So I want to go back a little bit though. When does this first get on your radar? When is your name thrown out or you throw your name in the hat?
So, Fred Henry, who owns Monolith, he loves Conan. And it's very special to him because it really launched Monolith.
It did.
And it has been in many ways it is our most enduring game. But I still think it's our best. I think it is the most, it really just exemplifies what Conan should feel like simulated. And I say simulated in the sense that I don't want to make simulators with these games where the minutia is I mean that it has the feel, it has the vibe of what it should be. So Fred Henry loves it. He knew that it was going to be an option to get that RPG. And because Conan, and he has said this countless times, that Conan is part of the DNA of Monolith. And really, he just means that like it's in our blood. We are very attached to Conan and creating tabletop experiences for that character in the Hyborian age, and maybe even other ages that Robert E. Howard put out. We'll see. But so I knew they wanted to do that, and then the topic came up about, well, what are we doing with it? Because the truth is, you said before the segment is like, do we really need another Conan RPG? And to me, I almost say no, but I say yes, because I don't think we have gotten the Conan system that at least a good fraction of Conan fandom deserves. And I say deserves because I am someone who's gamed for a long time. I am somebody who I played the D20 version of Conan and actually quite liked it. It's my favorite version of 3.5 isms or what have you. There was still too much in there. Too many things, too many tables. Oh my God, are we grappling now? All right, I got to get out my 2-page cheat sheet for this because this is, frankly, that is stupid. I'm sorry. Yeah, I get that it's an antiquated way to do games, and I think it's more niche to even do that these days. I still freaking love that game, and I navigated how to do it, but it was just absurd. It was like, take a stat, take a check, one versus the other, done. Why don't we just do that? Sorry, it's how I felt at the time. But then you got rules lawyers at the table, so you can't just do that. They're like, well, actually. So what I'm saying is, Conan and Robert E. Howard's Conan stories basically launched swords and sorcery as a genre as we know it. Correct. I'm not talking about Tolkien fantasy. I'm not talking about Brandon Sanderson. I'm talking about swords and sorcery. That is stories that are really born out of a short story tradition. You have sometimes morally ambiguous characters, pseudo heroes who really are heroes by proxy or because they're in the place at the time. People who want adventure, they want women or men and wine and things that glitter, and forward momentum is the ingredient here. Let's move these stories along. Let's whoop ass. Let's do a little philosophical musing and get to the next ass whooping. Let's have creatures that will blast your mind. But unlike Lovecraft's weak ass protagonists, we don't always have to run from them in Conan. It's only when it's a real abomination you've got to run away. They're not going to drive you insane. You're going to drive them insane.
That's funny.
With your thews and your steel. Anyways, I'm getting on a tangent, but I felt like, and like you, I liked things that happened in the D20 game. And I didn't write any of the mechanics in that game, but I contributed to 3 different fluff books for it. And, I think that, like you say, the passion of the people involved and the lore was excellent.
Yep.
The art and the hewing to the source material, all top points. I did not like the system. And I can say that I don't think it sucks. I think it's not for me. And I also heard that 2D20 got, really worked out certain kinks and streamlined some things for other systems. Even the John Carter game, I remember leafing through that while working on the Conan game and being like, well, why don't we use that for Conan? My God,
it's a much better version.
Better.
Yeah.
And to me, it actually felt somewhat tragic as a fan, because I was a fan at the time. Okay. I was a consumer of this material and I didn't really want to play the game. It just was like a brick wall in front of me. I know that it has its fans for sure. And that's very valid. I'm not here to say it's not good. I'm saying that to me, it didn't click with you. It didn't click. And it was too much nose in the rule book.
Yep.
And to me, that is not Swords and Sorcery. That is not Conan. Conan respects the scholars. He muses about how poets are actually more dangerous or powerful than he is, but he's not one. And I don't want our players to have to stare at a book, right? So anyways, long story short, when this became a thing and we were thinking about system, there's all kinds of systems that I think could work for this. But then we had a lot of conversations internally, and what we have with this board game is not only like 60,000 people who bought it and have presumably played it, but we have a template for how you capture Conan on a tabletop.
Interesting.
Now, I am absolutely opposed to having a special dice for an RPG. I didn't want anyone to have to own anything from the board game to be able to do it. And I also wasn't I knew we had to write our own thing, but what I wanted to do was capture some of that feel, and I wanted to aim at the audience who enjoyed that game. So to me...
So what's that juice, right? So what is that? Where's the overlap in these concentric circles you're talking about? This is very interesting.
So I basically said, okay, we have this RPG opportunity, but we have been largely a board game publisher. Mm-hmm. So why, if we want to do a system that's lighter, because that's the other thing is my ears have been hearing for years that folks want a lighter version of Conan. Now, I'm sure there's people out there who be like, well, I don't want it. I like everything we had before. That's fine. Guys, I'm not trying to replace your game. I'm really not. Yeah,
there's games for that.
If you love that game, it's an exhaustive system and all those books are still there. You should keep playing it. Please do come check out what we're doing, but I'm really not trying to replace it. I'm trying to do something for the folks who didn't want that. And so why not aim at the board game players who are RPG curious? And also thinking of like how 5th Ed D&D is kind of a tough starting point for some. So instead of using an existing system, I was like, let me fiddle with some stuff here and see, because I've had an idea for a very sort of familiar engine that takes things that like intuitive practices in RPGs, definitely not reinventing a wheel,
right?
But distills certain things down so it's familiar, it's fast, and it is liberating. Okay, so I mean, one thing I was like, you're going to put classes in a Conan game?
Oh, I'm so happy to hear you say this.
Of all the characters I can think of through fiction, Conan is the one that should not put you into a class. He is multi-class incarnate. So,
as is every character in the stories. Right?
Exactly. So, and I'm not going to get into the mechanics now. There's things where it's like you basically have an origin, like a starting package, but it's the same way that it works in like Dark Souls or Elden Ring, where it's like you start there, but you build after. So you're not locked in, and you don't have to think about, all these different stepping stones and prerequisites, none of that stuff. There's a tiny bit in terms of sorcery, but we can explore that later. So I wanted to create something that people who have played board games, or specifically our board game, who like that fast blood and thunder feel, can get that same vibe. And also even with the idea of resource management, in the sense of you have stamina or gems to spend to be able to do extra stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of being able to allocate those and making those decisions, choosing skills. And I wanted the combat to be fast. Didn't want us tracking hit points for minions and things like that.
Right.
Conan is not often stopped by wusses, but he gets enough wusses at him, he's going to go down too.
Sure.
And the same goes for, he's going to encounter something that will stop him in his tracks too. So I wanted this to feel empowering. I wanted a game like the board game where you feel like you're kicking ass until, maybe I'm not now. Maybe I got to think of things. Maybe I got to try some different stuff. So,
which happens in every Conan story, right?
Exactly.
He ends up running into a wall every time, and that's when it gets good.
And he'll run. He'll run if he has to. There's certain things, there's certain trends in RPGs that I wanted to, kind of like even the intro for the quick start, the tale that we put out. There's a part in there where it's like, you can fight. You might not want to, but you can. And there's ways that you can make that easier throughout the adventure. There's things you can find or whatever, but I don't want to necessarily write a thing where I don't want to be chained by expectations of every other RPG either. Right. And so the way we write these things is, I want it to be familiar and intuitive, but I also want players to have to realize, shit, maybe we can't win this.
Right.
Maybe there's a time that this is not we don't stand and fight. So I got slightly away from your question. I would say that
I'm still with you.
Yeah. I tried some proof of concept stuff. I wanted to, my whole thing was make it feel good, make it feel empowering, make it easy for the GM to run.
Yeah.
That was my number one, honestly, was I want something to, you can pick it up, learn it easily, make it easy for the GM to run, empowering for the players, give them tons of options, buffet options as far as progression.
Mm-hmm.
And just let the thing, just get it out of the way.
So Matt, as you've got some ideas, things that you like, stuff that you have said, these are parts of the RPG toolboxes that I've enjoyed. There's other parts I'm not going to include here because I've bounced off of them in other games. And you start playing around with this, right? And I'm sure the first few versions of it, you're like, this is not good. What I want to go to is I'm going to fast forward a little bit to when you're like, wait a second. We may not be done with this, but I think we have the core. So when do you think you first realized, I don't know exactly, this is not what it's going to look like when it's done, but it's going to look a lot like this. When did that happen? And how did you know that's what happened?
That's the thing that might be unique, definitely not unique, but I think that a talent perhaps that I have, maybe it's that I've developed the skills over time. Maybe it's my experience with writing scenarios for the board game and just spending so much time on it, is that when I get one of these ideas in my head, I'm thinking about it all the time.
Right.
I'm thinking about it when I go to bed at night. I'm thinking about it when I'm in the shower. I'm thinking about it. I'm constantly playing with ideas and not necessarily even writing it all down or comparing numbers, but putting pieces on an imaginary board and kind of knocking them against each other. I know that sounds abstract, but
no, I know exactly. I'm the same way, Matt. And I've talked about this with other designers where you, the analogy I use is when my wife wanted a new dining room table. I'm not a woodworker. I come from a lineage of woodworkers, but I am not one. And my wife's like, we need a new dining room table. I'm like, great, let's go. I look at the price of those effing things and I'm like, honey, just hear me out for a second. I think I can make one. I think I can make what you want. She's like, well, you've never done that before. And I'm like, you're right. But in this day and age, if you don't know how to do something, that's a choice because
YouTube, baby.
The resources out there right now, like you just, if you're ignorant at this point, that's on you.
Yeah, I agree.
So I don't know, a year and a half goes by and I tell my wife one Saturday morning, I'm going to go to Home Depot. I'm going to buy some tools. I'm going to buy some materials. I'm going to come back. I'm going to make this thing. Made it, came out pretty damn good. My wife was like, that's the first table you've ever made. I'm like, it is not. I have made this table about 1,000 times, but I just have never had put it to the materials. And it sounds to me that you're the same way where you just iterate in your head a million times and are, I don't know, how would I do this? How would I do that? Let me look this up. So I get it, dude. I totally get it.
I think that there's an internal balance, like as far as balancing things in my brain, because I am not naturally gifted in math. So it's not about precise number crunching. It's about balancing categories and choices and things like that. So with the Conan board game, the last few scenarios that I wrote for that are almost verbatim after testing, polishing, tweaking, almost verbatim to what I first wrote down just from
interesting
instinct. Just instinct. And this is a game, when we're talking about the board game, it is finely balanced. Like, especially the one versus many system, right? It has to be something that it's competitive. It is not D&D. It is not an RPG. It is competitive and it has to be balanced. And there has to be not just one path to victory. So I spent, hundreds of hours designing those scenarios. And so when it came to this RPG and I'm laying these ideas out in my mind, balancing the idea of stats, right? Like I have my 4 stats. I wanted to make sure each one was viable in its own way and that there is a reason for you to be pursuing any one of those 4 or mixing a few or having there's a reason for all of it. So all of that stuff, the truth is, once I finally got it down onto the paper and I'm literally just scrolling through this document going, ooh, yeah, I got to shave off a bit of this here because of that. I can get my pieces in place very, very well before any tests come into it. And then that's when I go, oh my God, this works. I mean, this part doesn't. And there's too much of that. And what the hell is that thing?
There's some sanding of corners. That's always going to happen. But the core is there. So my question, Matt, is the other piece that, and again, understand that I'm a fan of the board game, especially the engine. I played a lot more of the Batman game than the Conan game, just for whatever reason, it clicked for me better. But the Conan game is just damn good. And I don't get to play Batman without the Conan game. But when I hear again, is there's going to be an RPG, how much of your game is going to be on a table with a map with miniatures? And how much of it is going to be away from that? Because with its origins and the DNA being in the board game, I wonder about it.
Truth is, as much or as little as you want. You don't need any.
Excellent. Yep.
And again, that was one of the design choices. So, okay, there's a few things when I knew that we were going to, or that they were at least going to humor my attempt to create a thing and present it before we decided, we'll just make it 5th ed or something, which I was very opposed to, by the way. Even though I think that might be a moneymaker, that might be a path to victory. I was like, I don't care what you say. Conan doesn't fit that. You can make it.
It's not a power fantasy.
Yeah, but we can make it work. It's just why? I don't want a square peg round hole. Anyways, so one of the design principles was, yes, I want it accessible for board game players, I want it easy for a GM, mostly because I'm selfish and don't want trouble running a game. I want it streamlined. Very, very adamant about just trimming out heft. And there's all kinds of points where things came out like, well, yeah, but you could do this and do a No, we will not. And the sorcery will function the same way as we resolve skill checks and other things or attacks. I wanted these. They have different potentials, but the way we resolve them is all the same. I want it intuitive and simple. You don't need a separate book to learn how to do sorcery. That's absurd. So with because we published this board game, which has like hundreds and hundreds of different miniatures and all this cool shit and these beautiful boards. Yeah. Of course, I want to make it so that our fans can use all that stuff. Selfishly, I have like 5 display cases of like my mostly all painted Conan miniatures, and you bet your ass I want to be able to use those with an RPG. I wanted to make it so that we could do both. You do not need a single thing from the board game, but if you have the board game, and regardless of how much you have, you can find use for those components.
Very nice. So
we actually have 2. The only way that this comes into play is that we basically have 2 different systems for movement and ranges. And they're actually not even really different. It's that you can either do your range, like as far as if you want to do theater of the mind or theater of the tiny bit of scratch pad with a thing on it, you essentially can just look at your ranges that way, right? It'll function totally fine. The profile on the NPC will be fine if you do it this way. Yep. Or you can do it with our battle boards with, you know how they have just those eked out zones, right?
Right. Yep.
So you basically are moving 1 movement space. If someone is in the zone next to you, you can reach them with a spear. But if you have a sword, you have to move in and attack them. If they are, 5 zones away, you can still hit them with a bow, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
I'm actually pretty pleased with how well we've balanced those 2 things. Like, you can choose to use either. You can do in one session, you could have a battle board and use it one way, or you can do theater of mind for the other. You might not need one at all. Yep. Or you can even choose, well, I don't have any of this material from the Conan board game, but I kind of like the idea of just drawing zones on a board and having, tokens represent things. You can do that too. It's easy as hell to just go in. You don't even need a grid. You could take a piece of loose leaf and go scratch out some zones, put some stuff, and you could use tokens to do it. You could do it on an online platform. It's really, so I wanted to, one of my principles was that it has to work for folks who have the board game. So it's meaningful that they can use the components, but also it works completely fine without. So, Chris Shepperson, right? He put us onto this meeting.
Yeah, Shep is the one that connected us. Yeah.
It's crazy. He and I, when I was showing him, he came on as project manager and I was showing him my ideas for range and all that and how we were doing with the boards. And he was like, my God, this is eerily similar to how I did ranges for the Gaia complex.
Very clever how he executed that. So that gets me excited to hear that.
We basically clipped it out, popped it in because it just, it works. It works absolutely in line with what I was doing with the game boards, except
that's great.
Do it this way if you want, or do it that way if you want, or mix and match for different encounters. And in some ways on paper, people might be like, wait a second, I have to learn. You don't. And they work really well together. I can't stress how much that, like, I want to streamline this game. So when he even proposed that, I was like, hold on, wait a second. Are we talking more heft here? And I started reading it and I was like, oh, yeah, no, that totally works. We just, yeah.
Yeah, Gaia has, for my appetite, I think our appetites are very similar. I still need it to be a game, right? And now, don't get me wrong, I like storytelling games. Like, I will play the shit out of For the Queen. I will play the shit out of that game. I love that game. But when I'm doing a GM, RPG, I need a little bit of crunch. I need it to be still a game, but not too much. And Shep does a great job in Gaia Complex of finding that sweet spot that I enjoy. So it makes me really happy to hear that he's influencing that.
Yeah, and there was even like my elegant solution to just modifiers, not, Okay, so if you're behind a brick wall, that's -2. If you're behind a steel wall, that's -3. Sorry, I know I'm sounding like I'm mocking things, but I'm just like, this is unnecessary.
This is not for you, right? And that's
right.
The thing. Yeah.
Not for me. And we also have kept our numbers fairly low threshold in the sense that this is swords versus flesh and sometimes sorcery. This is not superheroes fighting each other. And everyone is human and will take a sword and they will bleed. So we don't have wild numbers. So our elegant solution of the rule of threes, I think he used something very similar with the Gaia complex as well. He was like, the GM informs that modifier, right? And it's going to be anywhere between a -3 and a +3. The human brain doesn't have to sit there and check. You don't have to overthink it, and you don't have to cross-reference a table. You have to just explain to your players, this is the scene, and if you're here, it's going to be this. Or if you're over there, you could spend an extra movement, and then you're going to get -3 instead of, a +3 rather than a +1 if you go the extra mile. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and the fiction informs it, right? And because it's not hard to go from the fiction to a relatively simple system, that connection is very, very easy. The last thing I want to talk about, Matt, is something I think that is interesting that we have danced around a little bit, but I want to dig into it a little bit more, which is this idea of having what it sounds like is a pretty powerful North Star going into this. And you've said it a few times, which is, I want to give a role-playing game to the people that love the board game. And having a pretty informed idea of the target for this game. Now, granted, that doesn't mean that's the only people that will enjoy this game. That's not what we're saying here. What we're saying is you have a fully formed population you're familiar with that you are targeting. How does that inform you in the creative process? Are you referring and checking yourself along the way, having that theoretical target audience?
Yeah, I mean, definitely in some ways. I think it's mostly that I didn't write these design tenets down, but it was that I had I'm a big Conan nerd. Okay. I'm very entrenched in that fandom. You know, I work directly with the rights holders on things. I have been all over social media for years with this stuff. And so not only to be in tune with our board game players, but with that audience too. And so, but also myself as a fan and the things that I would want from it. So I guess it was that I just basically said it. I was like, we have had a lot of Conan games and maybe we don't need another one. But to me, there's one more that we need. And it is the role-playing game that streamlines the process, makes it easy for old man gamers, okay, like me, yeah, who can easily run this thing, learn this thing, play it for their friends. And I think too, I wanted board game elegance with RPG potential or RPG freedom. That is really what I was saying this entire time. And so that does.
This could have been a 10-minute interview.
Yeah. No, but I mean, it's also, it's what I was saying to myself throughout the process as well, right? It's like, and that serves our Conan board game fans, but it also serves the greater, the people who don't have much time for this. Because there's a lot of folks who are like, yeah, I used to play RPGs. I don't have time for that anymore. And I'm like, man, I hear you. And so, and actually, like, Morkborg is something that inspired me, not so much in that's a very slim system, right? That's too light for what we're doing here. But I love the idea that I saw they had an adventure that was in a pamphlet. Okay. It was literally a pamphlet that you would get at the doctor's office or something. And I'm like, I love that. I love that you could pick this thing up, take 3 or 4 minutes, read it, know the thing holistically, but then also run it for your players. Because what often happens is with RPGs is, okay, you don't have time to write your own stuff. Well, here's a 45-page module for you with a million things you have to know and consider. I actually find running modules more cumbersome than pantsing it. I could pants an adventure easily. Players would have no idea. But if I did a module, I need to do some homework. So again, I wanted to find this sort of medium with like, how can we make our pre-gen adventures easy as hell to read, understand? They're a little railsy, some of them, but only railsy in the sense that like we have to emulate sword and sorcery stories here. To me, that's not really optional. We are adapting a very specific type of fiction. It doesn't mean you have to play this game on rails. It means that if you are doing the pre-gens, a portion of those are going to be a little more railroady. But we also were very careful to make sure we commissioned a bunch that didn't, right? That had more branches.
And to be clear about that point real quick, though, Matt, is like, and I do it. I've got a bad habit of doing it, which is using railroad as a derogatory term. And I fully recognize that there's a lot of different ways to play this hobby. There are people that like and want those types of adventures that have a specific street with guardrails in place that we go down together. There's not a goddamn thing wrong with it. So I just, it's good that I have that choice and that array, right?
I hear you. And that's exactly what I'm saying is that like part of my thesis here is that I wanted a Conan game that we haven't had before, while these other versions of the game are completely valid and awesome too. You know what I mean? And that's it for me. Like, I like a good sandbox too, but I'm more in tune with, I want, I don't know, as a player, I prefer that things, I like that things aren't being made up at the time. Even if they are, I don't want to know about it, you know? And with a sandbox, you really kind of have to do that, and it's fine. But I also want, I want drama, and
yeah, you know, that's right. You want the arc to potentially be there as well.
Yeah.
So when I back this game and I get it, I'm gonna be looking through and flipping through the final product. But there's going to be things that aren't in there, and they're not in there for a reason. And I want to go back to at least one of those. Can you think of something that got into the game, stayed in that game for a while, but ended up getting dropped because of many of the reasons that we've talked about? Can you give me one of them?
That's a good question. No, I definitely have some. And there's things too where I wanted to go down the path, but it wasn't the time for it.
Right.
Because again, I want to present I'm very careful that I don't want a game book that is going to overwhelm. So in fact, one of the other sort of tenets here, it wasn't really design, but it was more so the approach and the marketing, because we didn't just have a game. I mean, the Modiphius game is almost 10 years old. They sold it, and then 5 years later they delivered it or whatever. Right.
Right. Yeah.
Interesting. So it's been a while.
It has.
But I am very aware that there are a lot of Conan fans, not just Conan fans, Conan RPG fans,
right,
who have bought a shitload of books not that long ago. So I'm not looking to sell them a whole new game line today, right? So my thought was, whatever this is, a single book has to give them what they need. Okay. And then our other, we've confirmed this elsewhere, so I don't think I'm spoiling anything, but we will have another 2 books of ready-made adventures, which we are calling Tales. And even the system itself, the experience system, works on completing Tales. Even if you are pantsing this thing, you can framework it into a tale. Once the characters do X, we will award XP and move it forward. But I wanted it all based on Tales, not you kill this thing and it's worth this many XP. That's not what we're going for at all. It's complete the thing. And there will be parts within that can up your XP. You can do better or whatever. So the buy-in is small for this. You know, we also have the GM screen, GM kit thing. But really you can come in and jump into this game at a low cost. And so the things that we didn't get in there, for me, it's mostly the Hyborian Age is huge. Okay. And there's tons of it's more so about scope and things that I want to explore.
Got it.
Mechanically, though, there are some frontiers we still need to explore. Mass battles, sieges, war, it wasn't the time to put those in this book. We're deciding where in the, like, how we're going to break that off into the future. But I also don't want those systems to be terribly different from what we lay down, because I want things to be familiar and germane to the rest of it. So large scale warfare stuff, sieges and ship naval combat are things that are not in here expressly. I mean, definitely there's ways GM can navigate those with our core book, but those are things I want to explore in a little more detail with sort of tales in a campaign, and even maybe different cool structures or even mini games within that later, right? That stuff I is what I kind of shoved to the side and said, I want this to be a special occasion. And maybe that even means a book down the road where it's not, we don't have a book on sieges and a book on pirates. Maybe it's like a siege and sail book where it's like we put these other systems in. I'm very conscious of the fact that folks have dropped a lot of money on Conan games, conscious of the fact that crowdfunding is, some people are really screwing this up for us. And I don't mind saying that. There are companies out there, some that are yet to fall, that are going to. And if you look at the writing on the wall, it's there. It's concerning. And I take it personally, frankly, because I don't want to work for a publisher who's going to screw people over. And I don't. That's part of why I work for Monolith, is Fred Henry's not going to do that. I know it. So yes, the things that we didn't put in mostly are that I want this offering to be small. So even if you are a huge diehard of the Modiphius game, I'm not trying to replace your game, but please come over and see what we're doing at least. And if nothing else, our core book, like Jason Dural has written, he has distilled that kind of the lore. Like all the stuff they did for Modiphius is vast and wide stretching, but we've condensed things to, like, our core book will be if you're just a Conan fan and you're interested in the setting, that'll serve its purpose with gorgeous art and things like that as well. So, yeah, man, check that out. And also other Modiphius authors, like we've got Richard August is in there. Nice. Jason Brick is in there. Yeah, we've got really veteran, proven RPG writers to do a lot of these pre-gen tales. So,
well, I'm a little bit of a fanboy, so Jason is all I needed to hear about. So that makes me happy.
And Jason actually wrote Heroic Signatures, the company who owns Conan, had tapped me to write sort of their internal Bible for Conan that they would then give to license for people who are doing the license and stuff. And I was like, man, I could probably do that. I am not the right person for this. And so we put Jason, so he did that, and then we got him in to do this as well. So
that's fantastic.
That dude's top shelf RPG writer.
Yeah, Jason is just, not only is he like a good dude, but he's good at what he does. So I'm with you on that. So we're recording this before the Kickstarter has come out, before the crowdfunding has started, but I do want to, we're going to release it during the Kickstarter. So people listening, they're going to be able to go. So very quickly, can we just give some dates and what to look for?
Yeah. So currently we are October 15th. We launched this bad boy. If somehow this does come out before, then I encourage you to go to the Kickstarter link and sign up for a notification. But October 15th is our current launch date. And we'll run for at least a couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we'll have slacker backer opportunities down the road.
Slacker backer. I haven't heard that term yet. That's a good term.
Someone told it to me before. I was like, yeah, I'm keeping that. Storing that in here. And then, of course, that'll be open for a while. And then beyond that, we'll be in the web store. This available on, I can't really talk about our wide availability because things are subject to change, but
sure.
This is something people should be able to get their hands on. What was I going to say there? Something to do with a thing.
Well, one thing I'm going to tell you that makes me excited is I'd like when established reputable companies are putting stuff out via Kickstarter, because it also tells me that this is not going to be We did the Kickstarter. We fulfilled the Kickstarter. Talk to you
now
later.
Let's design a game.
Right. Yeah. What I love is knowing that this is being handled by a company that I can, if someone's listening to this a year later, then when we release this episode, they're going to be able to go to the Monolith website and they're going to be able to buy the goddamn thing. And I love that.
Barring, I don't know, pandemics or something. Like, who ever heard of those? No, but the truth is that this is the other thing. It's actually been a challenge for us as a company, but also it's what makes us safe, is that our shit is almost completely done before we even put it on. And of course, you're going to have people, well, that's not the point of Kickstarter. And it's like, fair, but like that's not been what Kickstarter's been for quite a long time. And
that
we
can
have that debate, but it's like, this is, you want to call it, well, you're just doing a pre-order. Sure. If that's what we want to say, that's fine. This game, dude, the core book is finished. Like it is finished. It is just it's being translated. The layout, it's gone to Heroic Signatures for approval. This stuff is done. It doesn't mean we can't make certain tweaks and like tiny little bits, but you pledge on this on October 15th, you're pledging for something that is baked. Yes.
That's great. That's great. So, guys, we're going to take one more break. When we get back from this break, we're going to get to one of my favorite segments. I'm going to find out what Matt's been grooving on. We'll be right back. Hey, it's me. I'm interrupting this episode, and I hope you're enjoying it, and I bet you're anxious to hear the rest. But before we jump back, I need a favor. Do you know someone who might enjoy this episode? Can you shoot them a quick message or maybe even send them a link to it? Listeners sharing this podcast was the primary reason we almost doubled our audience last year. Also, would you like to see and hear these games in action? Go to the Third Floor Wars YouTube channel and Twitch stream. Our actual plays combine compelling role-playing, character-driven action, and system tutorials. We create great stories while lifting the hood and showcasing the game mechanics. Links to both are in the show notes. Okay, last thing, and I mean it. Have you rated this podcast on your pod platform yet? Maybe even written a short review? It is a simple way for you to be even more awesome than you already are. Okay, now I'm done. Let's jump back and listen to the rest of this episode. So, Matt, this last segment is something that I look forward to in every interview. We spend the first hour and a half talking about who you are, what you make, right? And I really find it, I feel like the first segment just so much informs the second segment. It helps us understand why what you made is the way it is by understanding where you came from and where we are. Now I'm going to go beyond what you make, and I want to talk more about now the person who's making games. What are you consuming? So what is out there right now that it got its hooks into you? We talked about Mork Borg already, but are there other games, video games, board games, movies, TV series? What lately has kind of taken over part of your brain?
Oh, man. I mean, the hardest part of being a creator is that you have less time to consume.
Which makes you more discerning, which is why I love the segment, right?
That's true. Yeah. That's a great point. Okay, I'll give just a real rapid fire of things. So when I started design for Conan, this RPG, I was playing two things. One was Streets of Rage 4.
Okay.
So like an old beat 'em up.
Sure.
That actually inspired the Conan design quite a lot. As far as all I will really say is, when you hit a boss and it feels like their profile is different than the goons, and it's like there might be certain ways you have to approach to defeat them. That inspired some of the stuff for my Conan RPG writing. The other thing at the time, I'm actually in a video game lull. I do video games seasonally, and it's not a season that exists. It just means that I will go for months and I will hammer video games, and then I will go for months and I won't touch them. Yeah. It's crazy. But I finally stopped being a complete wimp, and those Dark Souls, Elden Ring, Demon Souls games just look so sick. I finally stopped being a wuss, and I approached them and I started playing them. And yes, they whooped my ass, but I've gotten good, as it were. and I have gotten the courage to go through those. And so those games really blew my mind creatively. I mean, I could talk about them for quite a long time, but a lot of those things inspired my approach to this game as well.
Right.
And mainly it's that idea of a starting package where here's my guy and I can then build as I want, buffet style. I want to sink things into this. I want to sink things into that. I don't want to have to choose a class that I'm then absolutely locked into.
Right.
That's on the gaming front. I've not been playing too much more other than, some Mork Borgen. I've been off of the board games quite a lot. My crew kind of broke up. We'll come back. We're all just busy, right? And mostly what I've been doing is playtesting the shit out of the Conan RPG.
Yep.
For movies and TV, I want to shout out to, I'm a huge Terminator fan. I know I mentioned earlier that I wrote some things for the the Terminator RPG by Nightfall. Come on, it's an Arnold Schwarzenegger property. It's still one of these things.
Gotta even make the Arnold connection. That's funny.
Come on, it's exactly. If I was like 8 years old and you told me I was doing the Arnold things of this nature, I'd be like, fuck you. Oh, sorry, I don't know who to swear on this one. I'm gonna have to bleep. Anyways, young Matt would have been impressed, but Terminator Zero, is that what it's called? It's an anime series that just released.
I've heard it's good.
Yeah.
I've not watched it yet. Yeah, I've heard that.
And I want to I need to clarify, like, I'm not a huge anime fan. I love animation, but I'm not like anime. Yeah. Like, I'm not entrenched in that. Like, I love Ninja Scroll. I love anime inspired things. Like, Jesus, I'm spending like hundreds of dollars on Street Fighter action figures here. So, there's a lot of stuff I'm consuming in that way. So I'm not huge on anime, but man, this is, it's solid and it is different.
Really?
It hits similar beats, but it's like the fan service of a good kind, where it's not just winking at you. It's kind of getting back to the roots of things. It might hit similar beats, but the fact that it's set in Japan is different.
Yep.
The fact that I love Arnold Schwarzenegger, but he's nowhere near this, because the Terminator is interesting outside of those things. And it doesn't just try to ape Terminator 2 for 5 other movies. I still actually have to finish the last episode, but I thought it was super strong, different, has some horrific elements. My God, if Terminator really comes back in a big way, they have to go back to sort of these slasher horror roots. And I don't know why they
which was the heart of the first movie.
Exactly. And that's my favorite one.
Yeah. No, I completely agree.
Yeah, that's super solid. And the other thing that both really impressed me and gutted me was Alien Romulus.
I have not seen it, so talk to me.
Well, I won't get into spoilers.
Please don't. Yeah.
No, but I will say that on its own merits, when it's doing its own thing, and even if you're not a diehard fan of that series, you're gonna love it, because it's really good at what it does. The choices for fan service in that movie just punched me right in the stomach watching that movie. And I know we're in an age where fan service has been a little overbearing, especially like I've given up on Star Wars a long time ago. And I love Star Wars, and I don't think everything they're doing is crap either. I'm not I hate Disney and everything they stand. Like, I don't care. Like, if it's good, it's good. But, oh man, some of the choices in Alien Romulus really, really got under my skin. And they weren't even huge, right? Yeah. They were just small things, but I was so strongly opposed to those choices.
I hear they take you out of the movie, and
they took me right out.
Yeah. And what I keep hearing, and I have not seen it yet, but what I keep hearing is I wish they had the guts to finish making the movie they were making, because it was a pretty freaking good movie. Yeah, exactly. And I'm hearing that, in the ranking of the Alien movies, it's right way up there. I'm hearing it, right around the third movie, which is a movie that people have gone back to and realized wasn't that shitty. It just was very different. I have
loved and continue to love Alien 3. I love Alien 3 as much as Aliens.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Alien 3
Alien is still top dog for me.
Yeah.
The first film.
No, I agree. I'm a big fan of 3. But I also admit that I was not a big fan the first time I saw it back when it came out. And I think that was a problem of expectations.
I actually think that was actually a pretty formative film for me. I think it was,
Really?
I don't know. How old was I? Geez, I don't know. I probably was like 11 years old when I saw that.
Yeah.
And I actually think it prepared me for a particular kind of art. It actually matured me. Right.
I could see that. It's a very mature movie. Yeah.
Spoiler alert. Hicks and Newt just fucking, they just die. Okay.
Yeah.
They don't give a they just get rid of them.
I'm not sure the credits were over.
Exactly. So it's like the balls. And I think a lot of it was put together by accident, right? It wasn't even intentional. And David Fincher won't even talk about that movie.
I know.
But to me, there's something about that where I don't want a film to do what I expect.
Exactly.
It is not a fault when something does something unexpected. So anyways, we don't need to get into why Alien 3 is worth your time. It's just Alien Romulus, go into it, plug your nose, like at the parts where you have to.
Yep.
Take a breath, move past it, because there is some great stuff in there. And
excellent.
I actually think I don't know if the third, fourth, or fifth act, but the final bit I actually thought was quite strong, other than it being an aspect of it is just absolutely derivative of the entire trilogy. I was like, really? You did that again? But the creature feature element of it is
excellent,
good in my books. So yeah, man, it's
been a big discussion on the Discord, on the Third Floor Wars Discord. And this is what I'm hearing from people who I trust, which is it's a damn good movie. Go see it. You're going to enjoy it. It's a damn good movie, but there's some bumps in the road, and we can be spoiled. And we can, it's okay to give a little bit of grace and say, you know what, you're 90% of the way there. And that was pretty freaking good.
And it was, the second time I saw it, I was prepared.
Yeah.
And I knew it was coming. So I was just enjoying all the other stuff. And I was like, yeah, okay. All right. Yeah. Plug in the nose. But yeah, ultimately pretty solid stuff. So yeah, man, that's what I've been digging.
That's beautiful. Well, Matt, there's a lot of really cool things to do on a Friday night, like playing Dark Souls, but you decided to spend it with me, and I want you to know how much I appreciate it.
Oh man, it was a blast. Truly, I love talking about this stuff. So
you came to the right place then.
Yeah, man, it's a good time.
Hey, for those of you listening, guess what? You're done. You listened to the whole damn episode, and I appreciate you doing that. Take care. Thanks again to Matt for taking the time to talk. Are you excited about another take on Conan? I'm dying to hear your thoughts. Please share them on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or Blue Sky, or email me at admin@thirdfloorwars.com. Your voice matters, and all those links are in the show notes. Can you take a minute to rate, review, and share this podcast? Sharing the podcast is the largest compliment you can give the show. Do not miss the next episode. I talk with the people behind the upcoming RPG, A Fool's Errand. Happy gaming, friends. And remember what Carl Jung once said: the creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct. Get up and make. You are a creator. Hey, are you still here? Look, the podcast is over, and you sat through all of the breaks and bloopers? Well, if you're here, might as well run over to patreon.com and become a supporter. Don't forget to rate and review this podcast too while you're at it, on whatever platform you're listening to. I do appreciate you sticking around. Take care.